Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morgan, Rough Motor City Madmouth. Yes, folks, I'm wearing a Miami Marlins hat. Why am I wearing a Marlins hat? Well, they're the flavor of the night. So, meanwhile, I'm pleased to be joined by Eric Katz. We cover you around the United States. Eric Katz out in Wisconsin. How you doing, Eric?
Good. How about yourself?
All right, and all the way in North Carolina. Well, hey, we got two North Carolina guys right up I-85 together. Rick Curti out in Charlotte. Good evening, sir.
Hey, guys. How are you?
And in Gastonia off of I-85, David Davino Hodges.
How you doing, guys? Great to be on the show.
And, of course, in my neck of the woods, Greg Fuchs, arguably one of the best writers I've seen come through my system. So, Greg put together a great story. And my policy here when we do these podcasts, if you write it, you talk about it. So Greg will be a classic example, and we're going to get to him in a moment. So with that said, obviously our topic tonight is Derek Jeter says adios to the Miami Marlins. You know, he was there for 4 years, and the Marlins went 218, 327 during the regular season under his watch. The team obviously reached the division series in the pandemic shortened 2020 season. They made it to the playoffs. Now, I think one of the better moves that actually Derek Jeter went out there and made was when he sent Giancarlo Stanton to the New York Yankees, got rid of a lot of salary there. And he actually didn't make out on the return. A few other things that are worth mentioning is that he was actually under the impression the club would have another 10 to 15 million to spend when you're dealing with the lockout, but obviously those plans change themselves. Therefore, you know, he was hoping to land Nick Castellanos. That hasn't happened yet. Now, with all due respect, I'm not going to sit there and go out there and chastise Derek Jeter, arguably one of the most respected baseball minds on the planet. We know that the Marlins definitely don't spend a lot of money, but I don't know a lot of things behind his departure, so I'm not going to be too premature about what took place between the Marlins and Derek Jeter and Mark Sherman, the owner. So with that said, Greg Fuchs, I want you to give everybody a basic overall summary of what you wrote about, and all of us are going to have a chance to comment on it. Go ahead, Greg. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
You're
I'm going to start off with something I didn't include in my article. When the Marlins hired Jeter like 4 or 5 years ago, I always thought it was an odd fit. He didn't have any experience as a baseball executive, no association with the Marlins whatsoever. In his entire baseball world, he played for the Yankees, who had one of the biggest payrolls in baseball, and now he's going to a team that he knew was going to have one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. So I thought it was always a very odd fit for Jeter. Now, after 4 years, how did Jeter do? Well, you have to look at the win-loss column, and I'll throw out the 2020 COVID season when I think the season was, 60 games long? Mm-hmm. In the other 3 seasons, the Marlins won 40% of their games. Never won more than 67 games in a season. I'm not blaming Jeter for that. Yeah, he's got to take some of the accountability. But when you got one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, 3 or 4 times less than the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, there's no way you're going to be able to really compete. Now, should you be able to win more than 40% of your games? That's a different question. All right. And obviously the Marlins MO for almost ever, because they've never had an owner with deep pockets. They always rank near the bottom of the league in attendance. So they have a small payroll. And anytime they get a really good player, they can't afford to re-sign him. So they trade him. So Adios, Marcell Ozuna, Christian Yelich, TJ Realmuto, Giancarlo Stanton. And even the few guys that they actually surprisingly picked up over the years, the Starling Martes, the Adam Duvals, they didn't last very long in Miami. As soon as Miami realized they weren't going to make the playoffs, they just jettisoned them for prospects. So the Jeter thing was 4 years, and they haven't named a replacement yet for Jeter. But, history tells you future Marlins decisions will be based on finances and not baseball. So until they get an owner with more money or Marlins fans actually start showing up at the ballpark so they can drive some local revenue, it's going to be tough for the Marlins and other small market teams in the league.
Now, I should point out a couple things. In the Marlins' history, they won 2 World Series titles in their 29 years. And obviously, we know that the payroll is factored in them not being a competitive team. We all know that the history of this organization, they let Miguel Cabrera go, Christian Yelich as well. So, again, these are guys that obviously who the sky's the limit. We know that Christian Yelich has done real well with the Milwaukee Brewers. We also know that Miguel Cabrera has obviously had Hall of Fame numbers with the Detroit Tigers. So, when you look at everything in general with the organization, I've always felt that, again, I'm not pinning this on Jeter at all. He walks into a situation where they don't have pockets. It's not like the stadium is really located in a very centrally located spot. I understand it's near the Miami International Airport. So, of course, Miami Heat draw well in the greater Miami area as well. This is a site that once upon a time the Orange Bowl was there, and they put 70,000 people. So I don't think there's any doubt they could pack the place. But Greg, as you and I know, that if you don't win, they don't support in this market.
Yeah.
Unlike places in the Midwest, Eric ought to know, Midwestern fans, you show a competitive team, and they'll show up no matter what happens. But that's not particularly
plus in South Miami. And in South Florida, baseball fans are very loyal to their teams. And as you know, South Florida is just filled with people who moved down here from Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, who are Red Sox, Yankee, Mets fans. They're never changing their allegiances. They'll go to a few games a year. They're not buying season tickets.
See, what I've often wondered, and I don't know this, so I don't want to sit here and mention a whole lot about it. I'm just going to throw it out there for you guys to comment, okay? Bruce Sherman says he's planning to spend a fair amount of dollars, okay? Now, I got to take him at his word if he says he's going to do it. Now, the only thing I often wondered is when he ended up going ahead and purchasing the Marlins, did he want Derek Jeter to be a part of the group so it gave him a better chance to purchase the team? You never know. And I understand that Kim Ng is going to go ahead and make a lot of the important decisions. And you know what? I don't care what anybody says. Don Mattingly will be a fine manager if you give him the horses. You can't judge Don Mattingly whatsoever based on what hand he's been dealt. I know I've been on a lot of Zoom calls. I've been at a lot of games, and the players love Don Mattingly. I like him. I think he's a heck of a person. And, the way he calmed things down during the pandemic, as evidenced by what I saw with the Zoom calls, Don Mattingly isn't the problem. I just hope he'll be part of the solution. So with that said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and defer to Eric Katz. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, this can't be on Don Mattingly, but he almost has a feel for the guy because we saw the job he did with the Dodgers, and he managed to pull out some playoff years with them. It's just unfortunately that he and I think Ned Colletti just could not get along. But you almost have to feel for him, knowing that ownership's cheap, and until the thing about Florida fans is spoiler. Obviously. The Heat kind of had the advantage, though, because Pat Riley took over that team, and Pat Riley is a name by himself with the Showtime Lakers as well as the Knicks. So that they had that advantage going for them, and then they get Dwayne Wade and also Shaquille O'Neal, and boom, the rest is history. Because especially now, they're generally a very consistent team. But the thing about Derek Jeter is, in terms of him becoming a executive, I thought I was doomed from the start. I love Derek Jeter, and I love everything he did for the Yankees, and I got to see that over the years. But it was doomed from the start. We saw it with Michael Jordan when he went to the Washington Wizards, despite having no connection to the team, and it was an absolute disaster. Except for when he played, and he was naturally the people come because all Michael Jordan has to do is stand there and they'll show up. And so, that was doomed from the start, just because, great players don't make great executives. The only person I could think of who managed to do both and became pretty good at it was Larry Bird. But
let's not forget Jerry West, but we know you weren't born then. But continue on, Eric.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. I was forgetting about Jerry West, but yeah, Jerry West did a heck of a job in both in both LA and during his advisory role with Golden State. But aside from those two guys, there really isn't a great player who makes a great executive, because they think that the players, because they don't have any control, because they think the players should be as talented as they were, but that's not always the case. And we saw it also with Magic Johnson when as both a coach and later on as an executive after he was on TV for a little bit. But again, this failed from the start. Great players just don't make great executives. They just don't have, they just aren't, they just were the ones, they're used to winning all the time. And then when things get tough, they bail.
Okay, well, so let me ask you, Eric, okay, what's your overall assessment of the job Derek Jeter did as a executive for the Miami Marlins?
I mean, jetsooning the veterans, that was smart. But aside from the prospects and stuff, because some of them are lottery tickets, so we have no idea how they're going to turn out. Aside from maybe Caleb Smith, who's done a decent job, the return he got for Christian Yelich has been a disaster. It's just, Lewis Brinson was supposed to be that guy that they were going to have at the top of the lineup, and I think he's barely hitting his weight. But aside from Caleb Smith, who's turned into an all right starter, I really can't, Derek Jeter said, we're going to be contending in 5 years, and they're not contending. I'm not even going to count the 2020 season because it was easy for those teams that generally you knew were going to lose like 90 plus games. It's easy for them to get off to a pretty good start in what was when the season began in July, and to make the playoffs on a shortened year. But if everything was all relative and normal, I don't think the Marlins would have gone to the playoffs at any point during Derek Jeter's tenure.
Fair enough. I mean, let's just talk about a couple players, and I watch them a lot. Pablo Lopez is a heck of a pitcher. I know they have Sandy Alcantara, and then of course the addition of some veteran stability with Jesus Aguilar and Miguel Rojas, who in my opinion is destined to be a future manager. And again, we can talk about pitching. I think is one of the things that the Marlins will be pretty good for. I'll be curious to see how Max Meyer comes along, and I'm sure that there's probably other pitch. And I think Sixto Sanchez is another young arm that I think will be a pretty good one too. So, all right, I'm going to defer to Mr. Opinion here. He's chomping at the bit to go ahead and fire it up. All right, Mr. Opinion, the floor is yours.
Well, the problem with the Marlins are cheap. That's all it is. They don't want to spend any money. You got to spend money. The Stanton deal, getting rid of him, they had to. That deal was atrocious. I mean, the guy is like Dave Kingman. He hits home runs and strikes out way too much. So I was glad that they had to. Once you get new ownership, that's the first thing they do. They dump payroll and they kind of rebuild. So that I totally understood. But the problem with the Marlins is that they're cheap. They've done this all through their history. They win the World Series. They get rid of everyone. Come back win another World Series. Get rid of everyone. They do these dumpster sales. And that's just the problem with them. That they're just cheap. And they had their new ballpark. They got all those great players. So they got their ballpark built. Boom, everybody's gone. So I mean, it's just the history of what they do. And with Jeter, he went from the Yankees, who have the biggest. There's no salary cap in baseball. They got all the money in the world. They got their own TV network. They are not afraid to spend money. And he goes somewhere else where they don't want to spend any money. So it really wasn't a good fit. He doesn't have really any connections there. It's South Florida. I guess that's the attraction, the lure. And the fans, the fans in Florida are not fans. They go to the games. If the teams are winning, they'll go to the games. If the team's not winning, they won't go. It's just too much to do out there. The beaches, it's just a great place. That's the last thing you want to do is go to a game, and especially if the team's not playing very well. And the Marlins right now they're pretty much like a collegiate team. They that's the thing about Major League Baseball is that it's not like basketball, it's not like football where you draft somebody and they play right away. They're in the minors for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Sometimes they sign them when they're still in high school. So it takes a while for your investment to come back. And so it's just a lot of question marks right now. But, I mean, this is the history of the Marlins. They're cheap, and they need someone with deep pockets that wants to spend a lot of money. And they just haven't had that. And every time they get great players, they can't afford them. So, like you say, they get rid of them. So once they need to get an owner that wants to spend money and wants to win like crazy, then we'll see what happens. But right now, they don't want to spend money.
All right, we got some comments here, and I want to bring these out here for you guys to evaluate. Ron Kroll says, I think it's a moot point, and of course, you're making a hypothesis. Of course, it's an educated guess, Ron. We know that.
Yeah.
And then he follows up, as you said, Scott, we don't know the real facts on why he resigned. Again, another valid point, Ron. We appreciate you chiming in and contributing. So, all right, let's go back to Ron's initial point here about the fact that we're making a hypothesis, which for all you people wonder what the word is, it's an educated guess. Eric, why don't you go ahead and respond to Ron?
Well, my first response is duh, and that's my response to that, because of course we don't really know what happens there. Of course the media itself hypothesizes, and podcasts like us, as well as shows like us, hypothesize too. I mean, he left because clearly something was wrong there. We can have our theories, but only, knowing Derek Jeter and his life and how he's been his entire career, of course we're never going to know all the facts. He's going to let us guess and guess and guess until we're tired and it leaves the news and we just move on. What else do you want us to do? Go to his house and ring his doorbell and ask?
Well, and then the second point, obviously, that Ron makes is, and it's a really good one, Rick Curti, that we really don't know the real facts on why he resigned, do we?
No, I don't know. I'm making a guess. I'm just assuming that that what I've heard and read from other reporters was that he left because they were going in a different direction, that they just had created differences. He wanted to go one direction, they wanted to go another way. He wants to spend money and they don't. That's my opinion, because that's me, Mr. Opinion, on why he left. That's probably why he left. But do I know for sure? No, I don't know. But that's just my opinion, because I'm Mr. Opinion.
Well, all right. So, Mr. Hodges, why don't you give us your insights and opinion, since you've been chomping at the bit to see the body language doesn't tell me, and I don't know. All right, David, go ahead.
Well, yeah, like a lot of people, I was surprised when I saw the headline that Jeter was leaving. He's no longer a shareholder with the team, and like guys have said, there'd be a lot of behind the scenes, topics that that we are not going to know. Obviously, so much is only going to be put out there, and as with sports or any business, they're going to obviously handle the not so pleasant situations in house. And obviously, there are things going on that he didn't like, and of course, if you're at a job and you don't like it, you got a chance to go somewhere else. Whether you work in retail, banking, the medical field, or even pro sports. But it's, as the guys have said, he wants to take the team in one direction, and he's not going to be given the, he's not going to let the horses run, so to speak, or to quote the great Bill Parcells, if you want me to cook, you better let me shop for the groceries. When it comes to drafting players, and that's of course Parcells the great NFL coach. But and if they weren't going to give him, the reins or the, I guess what's the phrase I could say, they weren't going to give him the let him follow his vision. Then he's like, well, then I'm here's my notice. Then I'm going to go ahead and sell what I own in the team, and and see you guys down the road in the funny papers. Kind of thing, but it's obviously there are things we're going on, and hopefully we will be coming out of this pandemic soon. So of course there's a lot of sports going on all over the place where people are finally coming back, and like any executive in any sport, you want to put a good product on the field, court, gridiron, or the ice. And if you feel like you're not going to be given the free rein to do so, you're going to look to go elsewhere. So, like a lot of people, I was surprised, but if it's not going to work, it's not going to work, and it's definitely going to keep us on our toes to see where he goes next.
All right, so let's put into perspective the fact that they have drawn the fewest fans of any MLB team for the last 3 seasons. Excuse me, folks. Not counting the 2020 season where there weren't any fans alive, but also let's point out that, with all this lack of indifference that's going on in the local fan base, let's talk about less money from local TV and radio rights, which is obviously, we know, Greg Fuchs, a key component for all MLB teams.
Yeah, I mean, while you guys were talking, I actually broke out the calculator on my phone because I'm an accounting geek. So I don't want to bore people with numbers. Marlins, lowest attendance in the league 3 years in a row, not including the 2020 COVID season. They only draw like 10, 12, 15,000 fans a game. If they could double their attendance, which still only puts them at like 25 or 30,000 fans a game, you take the average ticket price, throw in some parking and concession revenue, they would have over an additional $100 million in revenue.
Unbelievable. Yeah,
that's what they need to increase their payroll. All right. Local TV revenue, that would help too. An owner with deep pockets would help too. But when you're losing $100 million at the gate compared to a lot of other teams in MLB, you can't be competitive. We were talking before the episode started that Jeter may end up in the Yankees somehow. And I guarantee you, he'll be a much better general manager with the Yankees' $200 million payroll than he will be with the Marlins' $50 million payroll.
Well, we'll get to that a little bit later. I do want to point out, speaking of that, because you're right on the right track for sure, Greg. But, when we talk about the Marlins payroll, which is significantly less than the others, and to try to compare them to Dodgers at, I think 2021 at $266 million, and the Yankees, believe it or not, I'm going to go to Eric Katz in a moment on this one. Okay, spent $206 million. And of course, the Marlins are 27th out of 30 teams with a team payroll of $58 million. All right, Eric, before we talk about the Marlins, I love the analogy that you gave when you compared George Steinbrenner versus his kids. That was very good. Go ahead, talk about it.
Well, his kids, unlike George will spend, George did what the Dodgers do now, which is he doesn't believe in luxury taxes. And this is due in part that the Yankees have their own TV network, and so do the Dodgers. But George's kids are very different. They've kind of moved the route of rest of baseball. Rather than fill their team with free agents and win like that, they've come around to actually valuing their minor league system and getting guys from there. So basically, a little more building within, kind of like going back to what they did with the core four. With Jeter, Pettit, Mariano, and Bernie Williams, and all those guys, they developed from within while George Steinbrenner was suspended for a little bit. But they're trying to kind of go back to that model, and so far it's they've been consistent contenders. They've gotten to the playoffs. They still haven't gotten over the World Series hump yet, but it seems like it's worked so far. But in terms of free agents, they won't load their team up with free agents like they did. The last time they really did that was 2009. They'll just plug holes like they did that with Garrett Cole. If there's like a really good pitcher or whatever out there that can fill a hole that can't be filled right away with pitching or whatever it might be, they'll jump at it. They'll say, Cashman, do whatever you got to do to get them.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And again, I reiterate that the Marlins ranked 27th out of 30 teams at $58 million, and they certainly put a lot of money into player development. That's for sure. That's the way they have to do it. And when we talk about the Tampa Bay Rays, boy, you talk about masterminds of development and fielding a competitive team. Don Mattingly once told me in a Zoom call that, we hope to be able to follow the lead of the Tampa Bay Rays, but somehow, some way, they just find a way to win with nothing, with a stadium in arguably worse area than where the Marlins are at. And they're having stadium issues out there in Tampa trying to figure out where to put it. So, if you build it, we will come, but we don't know where they're going to build it, and they don't know where they're going to go. So, but when we talk about that, now what's interesting is that when we talk about the Marlins, and I just said, they're cross rival Tampa Bay Rays, it is amazing how the two organizations are so similar in the sense that yet, even though the Rays have yet to win a World Series, they have been more competitive than the Marlins as they've done a better job drafting and developing players. But as much as we want to pound the Marlins, tell me how many teams haven't even gotten to the World Series, let alone won it in a lot of years. And we can get as critical as we want with the Marlins. But let me tell you, they have 2 World Series championships in their pocket. They don't have any retired jerseys up over at Lone Depot Park, but those 2 World Series banners look pretty good out there. So, so let's talk about when we talk about the extreme poor attendance for both franchises, is it time for both franchises to move and be more receptive? I know we're going to Mr. Opinion on this one. I know we've talked about potential expansion franchise or relocation. So I'm going to evaluate each and every one of these cities. And I know there's probably only one person on this show that has a bigger opinion on this thing than we do, and that's Mr. Opinion. So we're going to size them up, Rick, okay?
All right.
So we really have a chance to shine, and then somehow, some way, we'll find a way to get our opinions. Las Vegas.
Yeah, to me, the A's are going to go to Las Vegas. That's where I see Oakland go, and the city of Oakland, been dragging their feet with them for 20-some years. So Oakland is going to go to Las Vegas, just like the Raiders went to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think the thing is, too, even if Oakland has a last-minute push to get one, is the damage done where the A's are just simply tired of doing it and they're looking to follow the Raiders to Sin City? That's anybody's guess. Well, I guess I have to ask Charlotte. And don't worry, every one of you guys will get a crack at this question. We had to lead off with Rick. All right, Rick, this is your Charlotte plug for the night.
Absolutely, Charlotte. I mean, we got Major League Soccer now. We got an NBA team. We got the Panthers. We got a hockey team that won the 2006 Stanley Cup with the Hurricanes. So, of course, Charlotte, we're one of the largest largest metro cities without the 3 sports. I mean, people are moving here every single day. People say Charlotte's a small market, but yeah, we have South Carolina next door that we could bring the people from South Carolina to Charlotte to see the games, and they don't have pro baseball, they don't have pro football, so they come to Charlotte. So we're 2 states in one. So there's no baseball in Nashville. There's no baseball in Virginia.
Right.
There's no baseball in South Carolina. The closest we have is the Braves. And the second closest is Washington, D.C. So that whole area right there, it would be a gold mine for Charlotte to get a team. And we have so many transplants out here. And our minor league Knights, their attendance is great. It's one of the highest in minor league baseball. So absolutely, Charlotte.
All right, well, we'll go to Portland since we know you have a little bias to the area. And don't worry, I'll get my 2 cents on this one. Let's talk about Portland.
Portland, I don't see it happening. I think Seattle would have issues with it. They'll block them, and it's just too close to Seattle. I know Vancouver was on a list. I don't see Vancouver getting a team as well. And so if they're going to put a team in Portland, forget about Vancouver, and they're going to put a team in Vancouver, you can forget about Portland. But the problem is Seattle. They're going to have issues with that.
All right, Montreal.
Montreal, they need a new stadium. Olympic Stadium, as Eric says, concrete dump. And it's an old stadium. It's been old. I remember watching it. It was one of the worst stadiums. And this was like in the 90s when I was watching the Expos. So they didn't need a new stadium. But, I felt bad what happened to them. It was no fault of the fans. They just stopped going because they knew their team was leaving. But if Tampa, if they don't build their stadium in Tampa Bay, they need to put it in Tampa. They have to. St. Petersburg ain't working. So if they're going to put it in St. Petersburg, they need to just go to Montreal right away because it's just going to be a broken record over and over. So Tampa, hey, you don't get a new stadium, and Montreal wants to build you one, go over there. So, yeah, Montreal.
And finally, we talked about Nashville, so we're going to throw that in there. All right, Nashville, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Nashville. Nashville and Charlotte are very similar. The thing with Major League Baseball is that we need more teams in the South. We have so many in the West Coast, Midwest. The South is just pretty much the Atlanta Braves, and they won the World Series. So if you can put have a team in Atlanta, have a team in Charlotte, have in Nashville, those are the 3 huge markets right now in the South, and you can put a team like the Texas Rangers or the Astros in realignment, and create a whole new Southern division right there. And right away, you're gonna have a bigger fan base with baseball in the South because that's the one location that's been ignored. And MLB has agreed that they want to play games in Asia and Germany and Mexico. And so if they can get more teams in the South and do all that, it'll just grow their brand even more and more. So to me, when they expand, and they always expand by two, it'll be Charlotte and Nashville.
All right. Well, you know what? The man that coined the phrase concrete dump, Eric Katz. Okay. And that is a classic concrete dump, Eric Katz. Okay. We'll let you size up these 5 cities briefly. Let's talk about Las Vegas, Eric.
I mean, sports. We're seeing professional sports be very successful in Las Vegas. Obviously, the Knights being the first, and the Raiders followed suit. They've got a fantastic stadium from what I've seen, and the Knights are, gosh, they continue no matter what they are, the fans will come there, and also there is just so, besides Vegas, the fans have been so welcoming to the two teams because they didn't have teams up to that point. And also with sports leagues investing more in gambling and stuff like that, and actually promoting the odds on TV, something never done before, there is just so much opportunity there, and they just have and then for example, the A's would get such a better market than Oakland, because Oakland is just, it's not a very nice area. And also we saw what the Warriors did. We've seen other teams leave Oakland because Oakland just can't get it done. And, it wouldn't surprise me if the A's do it. The A's have been threatening to move for a long, long time, probably going all the way back to the 70s. But now's the time. Vegas is a hot spot right now for stadiums.
Well, Rob Manfred would give me okay all day long. So, all right, Eric, give me some brief analysis on, let's go to Charlotte. What do you think? Charlotte, yes or no?
Love it. They got professional basketball. The Panthers, no matter how bad they are, they're a hit there. The Charlotte Knights do very well there. I mean, they're very receptive. The state itself is very receptive to baseball, judging by their support of North Carolina baseball, as well as North Carolina State these days, which has become a powerhouse in college baseball. I don't see why not. Baseball, they even have collegiate league. They even have a great collegiate league there.
Okay, Portland.
No.
Okay.
The Mariners won't allow it. The Giants might have a say in it either. And the only team that there's no way that those two teams will let that happen. We've seen teams in the past, like we saw the Athletics try and go to San Jose, and the Giants were immediately jumped in and said not so fast.
Okay, well, Mr. Concrete Dump, that leads us to Montreal.
Build a stadium. Like, y'all talk about baseball like it's no tomorrow, and you have people collecting all sorts of Expos paraphernalia. Build a stadium. If you're really serious about it, you got to build yourself a stadium. They have, their version is, they've got a government that wants to spend as much money as possible. Then if your people want baseball back, then you got to build the stadium.
Okay, and finally, Nashville.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. That'd probably be my number one choice.
Okay, and before I go to David and Greg, I should point out, for those of you, this broadcast is simulcast. It can also be seen on Twitter as well as Facebook Live. And if you, but as I mentioned, simulcast. So for all you folks that are listening to the show, you can do so on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't hesitate to subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. You'll get all the notifications on all of our shows. And if that isn't good enough, okay, go to www.southfloridatribune.com. You can find it there. So with that said, David Hodges, I'll lay them out there for you as well. Las Vegas.
Well, it's definitely it's only going to be a matter of time. As the guys have said, a lot of teams or franchises are flocking to that city. The Golden Knights obviously was an expansion franchise for the NHL. And as Eric and Rick have said, they've done very well. The Raiders, of course, are they're an established NFL team, so they've done quite well. I see no reason why Major League Baseball couldn't succeed out there in Vegas.
Okay, well, we know you're in the Piedmont region next to your buddy Rick Curti. So let's talk about Charlotte briefly, because I know we've talked about it a lot, and Greg and I want to get our 2 cents in, but go ahead.
I think it's only a matter of time before Charlotte gets the team, but I don't think they're going to be the first. Out of the list of cities that we're going over here. We have the Knights here. We've got the beautiful, I believe it's now Truist Park, since anything that was named BB&T is now Truist. Great view of the Seattle. Great view of the Charlotte skyline. I see it in the future. I think I mentioned before, but I don't see it. There will be, I believe, a few other cities would be in front of them in line.
All right, Portland.
To echo the guys, not a chance.
Okay.
The Seattle Mariners, they've had a lock on that. On my Seattle Mariners, I should say, have had a lock on the Pacific Northwest for the longest time. That's Portland. I don't see how it would pro baseball would survive up there. That part of the country, it's very soccer heavy. I mean, just look at the matches that or the attendance, the matches between the Seattle Sounders and the Portland Timbers bring. I know obviously the Portland Trailblazers. They're quite popular up there since my Sonics departed for Oklahoma City. But Portland, no, I don't ever see Major League Baseball going to Portland.
Montreal.
Eventually, and as the guys have said, that they've got to get a new stadium in there. That would definitely, I believe, would pump everyone full of baseball cheer, so to speak, and bring the Expos back. Obviously, when a professional franchise of any sport, leaves the city, you're always going to have the diehard fans, and it's if they truly want to get baseball back, they got to get the new stadium. They've got to get or at least start to rebuild the fan base. Numero uno is a brand new ballpark.
Nashville.
I kind of put them on par with Charlotte when it comes to Major League Baseball. I believe it's going to happen, just not right away. It's a great town. I've been there a couple times myself, and it's such a great atmosphere. It's a hop-in town. Of course, obviously, the past 2+ years of COVID, I've put in, extinguish that fire. But I could probably say within the next, I'll say kind of like I've said with Charlotte, within the next 10 to 15 years. But there would be a few other cities I believe would be in front of them in line.
Okay, Greg, we'll go to you, and then I'll give you my 2 cents. First of all, we'll go back to Las Vegas, Greg.
Well, I pretty much agree with everything Eric, Rick, and Dave had said, so I don't want to regurgitate what they just said. I think the bigger question is, who moves to those cities? I think Oakland was mentioned as one. That makes sense. They've had more than enough time to build a new stadium in Oakland, increase their attendance. Hasn't worked out. MLB's talked about maybe adding a couple expansion teams in the next few years, so that would be obvious for a couple of those cities you mentioned. Tampa. There is no way in hell I would spend tax dollars on building a stadium in Tampa. Unlike Field of Dreams, if you build it, the people will not come. I am convinced of that. That team needs to move somewhere. Marlins, they're not going anywhere. They just built that stadium. City's still got like 35 years on the bonds they have to pay off. Marlins have a long-term lease. So the Marlins aren't going anywhere. But Tampa needs to go somewhere.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this question, okay? A one-word answer, okay? That's all I'm looking for here. Ready? Okay, Las Vegas, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Charlotte, yes or no?
Yes, otherwise Rick would throw something at me through the screen.
It's okay.
Okay, Portland.
My concern with Portland, not a large geographic area. You guys seem more hung up on San Francisco and Seattle being upset, but it's not like they're 50 miles away from Seattle. But I think Portland would be last on the list.
Montreal.
I think they deserve a team. Got to build a stadium, though. So
And
maybe MLB just tells them, hey, if you build it, we'll give you one of the expansion teams.
Finally, Nashville.
I love Nashville as a city. They do well with the Titans. They do good with the Predators in the NHL. Of all the cities, that's the one I would vote for just because I love Nashville.
Okay, I'll give you my 2 cents. Las Vegas, yes, the Oakland A's are coming to town. Okay, Charlotte, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They just need a stadium over there. Portland, no way. Stick to the Trailblazers and the Timbers. That's all you've got. And then you got Montreal. Yeah, they definitely need a stadium there. That's the biggest foregone conclusion on the planet. I'm not looking to see them play in the concrete dump, although they never will anyways. And Nashville, listen, I had an opportunity to see a Nashville Sounds game last year, and there's no question about Nashville. They can support it as well. So I would give the affirmative to Las Vegas, Charlotte, Nashville, and maybe a big-time question mark for Montreal. Bear in mind, for a lot of you folks that realize unvaccinated players will not be able to play in Canada this year, and we always talk about the almighty dollar, in terms of being able to spend. We'll move on. So with that said, okay, we're going to talk about the Marlins, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. So I guess the easy question for you guys is, what kind of shape has Jeter left the Marlins franchise in for the near future? And I just want a basic answer. We don't have to get into a long, drawn-out one. I mean, is it better off now than it was when he inherited it?
I will give him that it's at least improved from what it was.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, it's improved slightly. I mean, he wasn't there very long, but at the time he was there, I think getting rid of those contract of Stan was huge. They had to do that because that was just a monstrosity of a contract that never should have happened. But in the short time he was there, they've improved slightly, but but just slightly.
Dave?
Out of 100%, I'd say he's probably left the team 60% to the good. I'm sure there might be will be a few people that say, well, came in, left it in shambles, and took off, but I think he did okay.
And of course, the man that wrote this story, Greg Fuchs.
They're probably slightly better, and I base that on the pitchers they have. Scott, you rattled off a bunch of names earlier.
Well, I'm going to rattle them off again. Okay, so
those guys are extremely talented. They could, if they can stay healthy, that could be one of the best rotations in baseball, not only this year, but for the next 5 years. Their problem is none of them can stay healthy. And it's spring training, and Sixto Sanchez is already hurt. They don't know when he's going to pitch.
So
they've had a lot of problem developing position players, though.
So let me go ahead and read those names off now that we talked about it, okay? As you're telling folks out there to get familiar with Sandy Alcantara, I saw him pitch. This guy eats up innings. I love Pablo Lopez, another fine pitcher. Trevor Rogers made the All-Star team last year. Sixto Sanchez, yeah, there are injury issues there with them. Edward Cabrera, Eliezer Hernandez, and Max Meyer. Yeah, those are some young studs there. So they're definitely, I think that Derek Jeter placed a premium on pitching, and that's not a bad group to work with. Like I said, it's all predicated on health. I know these guys are all talented, and of course you want to make sure that they're going to have to match the talent, because we know that the Marlins offense has always been a question mark. And of course, when you have low scoring games, that means that pitchers have to pitch as close to perfect as they can to keep you in it. So now bear in mind, okay, we don't know who the Marlins next CEO will be. So whether he'll be able to do differently than Jeter, as many decisions will continue to be financially driven as opposed to baseball driven. We know that's the story of the franchise. So with that said, okay, would Marlins attendance increase significantly if they were to become consistently a competitive team? All right, well, you know what, Rick? I'll lead off with you there.
Well, the fans, it's the thing with Florida. If they play good, they'll show up. If they don't play good, they won't show up. Just too much to do in Florida. They're like, the fans there are just like, if they play great, good. If they don't. So if they're like heading to a World Series and they're setting records for most wins in a short season, making history, they'll show up. But if they're not doing that, they won't show up.
All right, Greg.
If they can be consistently competitive and they keep their star players, I'm not saying they're going to sell out the stadium, but I can see them drawing 25,000 people a night, which will help a lot in terms of increasing their payroll.
Well, I like the two words you mentioned, and I think they're very important to bring out: consistently competitive. Because you mentioned, Greg, earlier, you put 20,000 people in that place. That's a different animal. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I know consistently competitive. So continue on, Greg.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned Sandy Alcantara, and I know it seems like he just got to Miami. I want to say he's in at least his third year, maybe his fourth. I'm not sure. So he's one of those guys a year from now, based on history, they'll be looking to trade. If I was the GM of the Marlins, I'd be signing him to like a 6-year deal right now. Buy out the next 3 years of arbitration, buy out 3 years of free agency, and let the fans know, hey, we just took one of the best pitchers in baseball and locked him up for 6 years.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, kind of like what the guys have said, with Miami being such a tourist town and, being a party town as well. If people are coming to South Florida, they're coming for the sun. Local residents probably the same as well. Been to Florida myself, never been to Miami, but from what I've heard and people that have been there, probably going to a Marlins game, would be the last on their list, unless it's a rainy night and everybody just wants to go inside.
All right, Eric.
As far as they got to show that they at least want to be competitive first before the fans start taking them seriously, because Florida has always been a town where people kind of come down and they retire. These people come. I think most of Florida, is full of people not from Florida than there are people actually from Florida. But until the Marlins show that they actually want to be competitive, I can't see the fans showing up to that place, and they'll keep on starting over and starting over and starting over to the point where, why bother? There's a bazillion different things to do in Florida. There's the beach, there's Disney World, there's everything you could think of that people would want to do in Florida besides go to a Marlins game. Because I don't hear a whole lot of excitement saying, oh, let's go to a Marlins game. Just like, unlike people who say, let's go to a Brewer game or let's go to a Cubs game.
Well, I think when you put it all in perspective, I think we can all agree on this, okay? That if you're a Marlins fan, you can be thankful you have a good pitching staff. I think the only big question is, can they find a few bats to help them out? I think we all can agree on that. I don't think that we need to dwell on it. I think we've talked about that plenty. So with that said, as we put a wrap bow on this, I got a couple other points I want to get to. All right. To me, Derek Jeter winds up with the New York Yankees in the front office. That's what I think he's going to wind up. Rick Curti's nodding his head. Yeah. What do you
think? Team president.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
Oh yeah, the Steinbrenners have done this for other players before. They brought back Reggie Jackson despite a stormy end, and he was kind of a quote unquote special assistant when he was there. And they've done this for other players too. They brought back Whitey Ford to be a pitching coach. They brought back Ron Guidry to be a pitching coach. They brought back Aaron Boone, who's only known for the iconic moment in the 2003 ALCS. We've seen them do this before for former icons and things like that. They'll do it again for Jeter. He'll have some sort of role in the front office.
Dave?
Yeah, definitely. As the guys are saying, the Yankees, they love to keep it in the family, and it's only a matter of time if he's not in talks with them already. But yeah, he's definitely going back to the Bronx.
All right, Greg.
I can easily see that in some role. I'm not sure if he'll be the primary baseball decision maker, but I can see him being in some role there.
All right, well, time is allowing us to do this, so obviously everybody knows about March Madness. So with that said, everybody gets a brief prediction who's going to walk away with the hardware in a matter of a few weeks. And Mr. Madison, Wisconsin, we've been to the Badgers a little bit. I'm going to give you a 2-part question here, though, Eric. Everybody else gets one, okay? How are the Badgers going to do?
I'd say Sweet 16 and Elite 8's the ceiling if they get lucky.
All right, give me your pick. Who's going to win it all, Eric?
University of Houston.
Rick Curti.
Gonzaga.
Greg.
I am not a college basketball expert. I sincerely hope Gonzaga makes it in. My dark horse, because they steamrolled through the SEC tournament until losing by a few points in the final, was Texas A&M, and then they didn't even make the tournament. That was the shocker for me.
They got
All
hosed.
right, so I'm going to put you out there, Greg, for Gonzaga. Is that correct?
That is right.
All right, David.
Yeah, I'll pick Gonzaga as well. They've had many chances, to get over that hump. They have done it. I think the Zags finally get it this time.
And I will tell you right now, I do believe Gonzaga will finish the job. However, they're the person out here that isn't going to tell you that they're not going to root for Mike Krzyzewski to go out on top. But I know they have a pretty tough bracket to get through. So, all I can hope for Mike Krzyzewski is at least get those 1,200 wins. You've got a lot of hardware. So if there's a sentimental choice, I'd be rooting for the Duke Blue Devils. And if I want to take it a step further, being a Metro Detroit guy, I hope Michigan and Michigan State go a little ways. But so be it. Time will tell. At least we're going to get our March Madness thoughts in here. So, guys, been a really dynamite broadcast tonight. Something that I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about with Derek Jeter. And, to me, Derek Jeter will always be sacred anyways. I don't care. I mean, I won't judge what he did in Miami as a reflection of his baseball knowledge and expertise, because I think it really comes down to, let's see what hand you've been dealt. Well, it's safe to say that, he didn't have a lot of jingle bells to go out there and spend, but I do believe that Derek Jeter will be fine no matter what. So, what can I tell you? So time will tell. We'll track Derek Jeter. With that said, Eric Katz, we're going to lead off with you. Let everybody know they get a hold of you and what you're doing.
You can follow me on @SportsTeamNews on Twitter, and I also write for BellyUpSports.com. I'm covering the Wisconsin Badgers football team.
Beautiful. All right, Rick Curti.
You can find me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. I'm on Facebook at Charlotte MLB, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. I'm on Twitter at Charlotte Bats, and I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti. And if you have any questions, you can email me at cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
Dave Hodges.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook at Dave Davino Hodges, Davino. For those that don't know, I'm a huge soccer fan. Always been a fan of the Brazilian teams, and so it seems like all those guys have nicknames that end in HO or NHO. I figured, why not give myself one? I'm also on Twitter at Dave Talks Sports.
All right, Greg Fuchs. Make sure you lay it all out there for him. I mean, everything you've got social media wise. All right.
Will do. You can follow me for all my articles that I write on the SouthFloridaTribune.com. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. And please, please, please follow me on Twitter, G Fuchs at Gregory Fuchs.
Yeah, and I'm going to say one thing about Greg. I think we can all agree to it, as well as some of the other co-hosts that are on here. Greg Fuchs is a heck of a writer. He really is. The information that this guy provides us is so invaluable. And if you haven't read his articles, then please go out there and look for Greg Fuchs on the South Florida Tribune. I've been around a lot of writers in my 42 years in journalism. And I'll tell you right now, Greg, for a guy that doesn't have a job in the profession, the way your language, your grammar, and your points to me are just outstanding. So, folks, follow him on Twitter, look him up on Facebook, but more importantly, look for Greg's stuff on the South Florida Tribune. With that said,
thank you for those kind words, Scott. The check's in the mail.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. I'm sure we'll cash it in your restaurant somewhere along the lines. But that said, okay, if you didn't hear me the first time, I don't mind doing audio and visual replays. Okay. If you want to hear the broadcast, then you can find it on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. It's a free situation. Then you get all the notifications about when these shows are out there. And also you can find them on www.southfloridatribune.com. You can find the Tribune on Twitter at Tribune South. You can find me, Scott Morganroth, on LinkedIn and, Instagram, although I don't do a lot with it. Every so often I get it out there as well. So there's a lot of different ways. And more importantly, don't forget to email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com because I got news for you. We always take feedback. If anybody has any comments or suggestions for shows, don't hesitate to let us know. And chances are we'll probably go ahead and use them if we get them. And if I really like them good enough, then I'll be more than happy to invite you guys on the show as well. Guys, every one of you guys did a dynamite job. Okay, I don't do the Jimmy Walker Kid Dynamite because then I'll really run into some situations with my voice. And I kind of need it because I do anywhere between 3 to 5, 6, 7 shows a week all over the planet. So, but meanwhile, On behalf of Eric Katz, Rick Curti, Mr. Opinion, David Hodges, Mr. Soccer, and Greg Fuchs, our writer, this is Scott Morganroth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. We have a lot of good shows coming up, and we will go ahead and notify you when they happen. So meanwhile, take care, everybody, and have yourself a great night. And thank you very much for joining us. And a special shout out to Ron Kroll. Thanks for your input. We really appreciate you and anybody else that ultimately gets involved. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, y'all.